Alright, I'm going to make a quick video to demonstrate some of the surface mount soldering techniques that I've found work well for me. There's a couple things to note here before we start. One is make sure you're using a decent iron. This one is far too large for the job, but it'll work for today. I don't have any other tips on me, so that'll have to do. Always work with a wet sponge and work with a clean tip. If your tip is gross or corroded, get a new one. First thing we're going to do, we have a little board here. We have two surface mount diodes laid out. What we're going to do is we're going to mount the two diodes on these two positions. These are ground plane on one side and their connections on the other. So as I mentioned in an earlier post, we're going to start on the ground plane side, and we're going to start just by tinning the ground plane. So get the iron on there, tin the end of the iron, then tin the pad. Now we have a thin coat of solder on the pad, and we've heated it enough to get it to flow nicely on the pad, so we know we won't have a cold solder joint, at least on the pad. The next step is we're going to move the solder aside, grab our tweezers, make sure we have the diode aligned in the correct position. Don't grab the part all the way down, grab the part way up so that you can actually put some downward pressure on the part. Wipe your tip so it's clean. Position the part where you want it, and heat the pad up on the board as well as the part, and wiggle it until the solder flows, and that should be good to go. Oh no, it didn't quite take. So let's try that again. Get that solder wet on the board, move the part into place, heat it all up, and move it away. Okay, so now you can see that this diode is fixed on there. It's not going anywhere, so we have a reasonable joint on this side. Next step is we're going to do the other side now that this is in place. So you were holding the component the entire time with the tweezers in the correct position. This side is now soldered. As long as you don't overheat it, this part will hold itself in place. So we're going to flip this around now. Same thing, we're going to wet the iron first with a little bit of solder. I'm going to position it on the crack between the part and the board and flow a little bit of solder in there. Move this off here. So now you can see we have a joint on that side of the board. It's now done. The part's held in place on both sides. Now we're going to go back and touch up the first side with the ground plane. We don't want to overheat this, because if we overheat it, the heat travels through the part and it'll unsolder the spar pad and the whole part will slide right off the board. But we do want to put a little bit of pressure, because if we put some pressure here and the part comes off, then we know we had a cold solder joint over here, which is no good. So I usually put the solder between the iron and the part. I just touch it in there a little bit of pressure, take it off, and that's it. So if we look closely at this now, I don't know how easy that is to see, but we have two relatively clean solder joints, and we know that both are good, because when I pushed, this side didn't come off, and this side here was already well flowed on both sides, so it should be good to go. So that's a part done. It's relatively quick, just move through. Always start with the side with the largest thermal mass, in this case the side with the ground plane. I hope that helps clarify a few things.